Hi, and welcome to White Hat versus Black Hat SEO show. My name is Josh Bachynski. With me, I'm doubly blessed today on a special Friday presentation to have with me my co-host, Clint. Say hi, Clint.
Hi, everyone.
And we're blessed to have a special guest with us today, a very top-level White Hat by the name of Eric Enge. I hope I pronounced your last name right, Eric.
You did, so good job.
Woo.
First point.
Well, my last name is difficult to pronounce, and so I get it if it gets mispronounced. I'm glad I got it right. So as I said, we're very blessed here to have Eric with us today. Eric is a White Hat. I've been doing SEO for 20 years. I do SEO for big clients. I manage millions of visitors a month. And I'm only saying this to give you a sense of how top level Eric is. Eric is probably a level of White Hat SEO, which is even above me. If I'm being honest, I have to admit. I have Google's email. I can email Google and get a response within 4 minutes, which is pretty good. But Eric actually presents with Google at PubCon. So he's another level that's actually above me. Google will not appear publicly with me anywhere, shape, or form. Actually, that's probably on purpose, actually, given my reputation. But Eric actually presents with, he presented with Gary Ilyish, who is a webmaster trends analyst from the Zurich office from Google. He's presented, you presented with Gary twice now, you mentioned, at PubCon.
Yes, this year at PubCon and a year ago at PubCon, actually, we did. And then actually, truth be told, also at our own Next 10X event last April. So a few times now.
Fantastic. So folks, if you have any questions, if you're watching this live on YouTube, the chat should be on the top right-hand side. Please, by all means, ask us any SEO questions that you like. If you want, I'm getting really old and these glasses don't help very much. So if you could put 3 asterisks beside any SEO questions you want to be sure that I see, otherwise I might miss it amongst your general chatting and things that you do. So that'd be fantastic if you can mark it. Oh, you can, Clint, my co-host, even said mark the questions with 3 asterisks. Clint's on the ball today.
I'm on it today.
Fantastic. So because Eric is very high up there with Google, this is the White Hat versus Black Hat show, but there's no real black hats here. Clint is just wearing this black hat, just for kicks because he looks good in it. It's not like Clint is a nasty black hat doing black hat stuff. But interestingly enough, before we started the show, Eric mentioned actually that he used to play for the other team, that he used to be on the other side. So I said on air we'd have to ask you that. So what did this mean, Eric? Because you're a top level White Hat. Everyone knows you as a White Hat SEO presenting with Google. But what is this I hear about you playing for the other team at one point?
Well, when I first got into SEO, which was in the very early 2000s, basically it happened because I was doing some business development consulting work for a client, which has nothing to do with search. But I kind of just started up with them. And after about 30 days, I said to them, hey, we got to figure out this search thing. It seems like we might get some business there. The site was a DVD e-tailer. So, the CEO, being a good CEO, turned around and looked back at me and said, okay, Eric, you brought up the idea. You go do it.
Right.
So I did. And that was all pretty straightforward stuff, what we did there. But after about a year, they were doing $3 million a year in sales from search. And it was like, scratched my head and said, wow, I think I probably should do more of this stuff. And I started a venture with a friend of mine publishing education lead gen sites. And actually, the first site we published was online-motorcycle-parts.com. And we were ranking #2 on motorcycle parts 1 week after launching the site. But then the second one was this education lead gen site. And it didn't start right away, but after a while, we began to understand that there was this thing called links. If you do stuff with links, it could actually have a beneficial impact on your SEO.
Who knew?
Yeah, who knew? And so the first thing that happened is that I started doing a lot of link swapping, right? And it took, in a single summer, I executed 1,000 reciprocal links on this site with no help. So
back in those days.
Yeah, and he's just grinding away at it every day. And that worked for a bit. And then we said, well, okay, what if we launch some additional sites And so we created some sites where we scraped forums on topic matter, and we launched sites full of forum content. One of them was nursing-comments.com. If that domain comes available,
okay.
Yeah, if that domain becomes available for you to purchase, I might advise you to pass on it. And that worked pretty well. And then finally, we hit upon the idea of, well, what about student university newspapers? It looks like some of them sell links. So we went and bought links from these guys. And our SEO soared even further. We, at our peak, were doing 700 leads a day. When you realize that we were getting paid $8, $10 a lead, and there was 2 people in the company, they were pretty heady days.
Yeah.
But then December 14th, 2004, approximately, happened. I came down in the morning, and the site had been flushed from the index by Google.
The benefits and problems of blackout SEO.
There you go. So this is actually the beginning of a set of circumstances that put me on my white hat course. Because what happened is I went to SES Chicago that year. It was like late for some reason, but it was definitely after the penalty. You know, I didn't actually get a main path, but I kind of got an idea what the conference things were about, and I came back and made a decision to go to SES New York the following March, I think it was. And that was the start of every single time Matt Cutts presented at an SEO conference. The next 9 months, I was sitting in the front row. I was the first person up to speak to him. I had a message, something I'd worked out that would be of great deal of interest to him, as well as, you know, my own story. And, you know, nothing happened until SES Chicago the following year.
You're trying to get Matt to remove the penalty, or?
Yes, we were. I was. Nothing happened until the following SES Chicago, when I saw him again and did my thing. And I've never received any confirmation of any sort, but somehow magically the next day the site was back in the index.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, we had worked our butts off to truly fix the problem. We had removed all the bad links. We'd killed the forum comment sites. We had upped the content. We got links from, I think it was 14 different State Department of Education websites. So we started to build up a really killer link profile based on what we'd done. And so we went straight white, so to speak. And I have been ever since. And partly, you know, I just kind of felt like a debt for something that I didn't ever necessarily receive, except for it sort of magically happened the day after I talked to him. And I've never talked to Matt about this, and I can't actually absolutely confirm that he did anything, but I find
it highly correlative.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the story. It's and it's really very much why we espouse the philosophy the way we do now, and the way we push things the way we do now, because
that's an interesting story. It's similar to a lot of people's story, of course. Right. Back in the day, you know, early 2000s, you know, SEO was such a new field that black hat, white hat, there was not that much of a distinction. I don't think so. And it was just kind of like a heyday. But it's also interesting you mentioned, I say on the show often that there's a million ways to skin the cat. There's a million different ways of doing SEO. Your way is kind of the classic white hat way of going to every big conference, talking with Google employees, you know, among other things you did, of course. But you know, we don't get a lot of that kind of crowd on the show, which I'm very happy you're here, because I wanted to show people who watch my show that's one way of doing it. Go to all the SMX conferences, go to all the big conferences, go to MozCon, talk with all the big white hats, talk with all Google as much as you can, and get in, worm. I don't mean this in any kind of negative way or pejorative way, but worm your way into the cool club and kind of be in the cool club is one way of doing it.
Sure. No, absolutely.
And I'm certainly guilty of that a little bit. I mean, I've had discussions with Miley Oye. I've had discussions with Matt Cutts, somewhat infamous discussions. I do have Google people I rely on, but at the same time, I like to also branch out and do experiments and do other kind of things as well. And it's interesting. Like, some people will boil all of SEO down to learning this one software program. Usually on the black hat side, this software program is SEO to them, right? Like, you could even do it on the white hat side with, say, SEMrush. SEMrush is getting robust enough now that you could probably do not a half bad job at SEO, just learning SEMrush really well and getting links. But they tell you to get links from here, you ask for links, or that would be black hat. You email them and suggest maybe a link would be nice. Is that white hat maybe?
Oh, you can ask for a link. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you get into a whole different dynamic. If you're asking for a link, the question is, why isn't that just asking somebody you don't know on the other side for a favor? And how likely is that to succeed? So then the white hat thing becomes, what do you do? Well, this is neither white nor black. What do you do to persuade them that it's in their interest to link to you? The white hat way of doing that is finding a content reason, or why it would be good for their users, or something like that. But nothing wrong with asking, right? I mean, there's a very popular thing that people do. There are tools out there that will tell you and find for you sites or pages that link to 2 or more of your competitors, but not you. Well, if they're linking to 2 or more of your competitors and not you, well, maybe it makes sense to get added, and right? Yeah, exactly. So that is very
why not me? Yeah.
Well, exactly. I mean, clearly you're trying to provide more than just like, here's your one favorite source for this. You might be trying to provide a list. Well, I belong on the list,
Right.
And,
well, that's interesting you say that, Eric, because I always thought that Matt Cutts said that the distinction between white hat and black hat, really, when you get right down to the fine point, is that, did you ask for the link, or did you not ask for the link? If you ask for the link, I believe he said that's black hat on otherwise that's black hat on that side. You would disagree?
I do. I mean, it's marketing. Look, there's a matter of how you do it, right? I gave you a very specific scenario.
Yeah.
Right? Is this reach out, you see 2 or more different links, to competitors on some page, and you reach out. They still have full editorial control, right? I didn't attach a check. I didn't offer them free product. I didn't give them a discount on our services. Just said, hey, this might be good for your users. And they still have full editorial control. And I think as long as they have editorial control, I don't view that as being black hat. And yes, the issue for Google in communicating about these things, and it's a very fair issue from the point of view of what they're trying to manage, is if you give someone an inch in a certain direction, there are going to be thousands of people who want to misinterpret it into a mile, right? So the asking for a link, the way I suggested you do it, becomes, oh, well, shoot, I'll ask lots of people for links and add them a little, 50 a month under the table, or 500 a month on the table, or whatever it is, right? And no one will ever know. And that's kind of the thing that people misinterpret the idea of asking for a link. But yeah, I think, well, I mean, I'll give another example that fits into this. What do people think about guest posting, right? Is guest posting over the line? Because you're creating the content. So I guest post all the time. I write a column on Search Engine Land, right? So, and from time to time, if I'm writing about a study that we've done, I link to it. Not every article, but once in a while, and I certainly get a byline link out of every time.
Right.
Now, I'm not on Search Engine Land because of the massive SEO value I'm expecting to get out of it. I'm out of it. I'm there because it's the right marketplace for what I do.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that either. But again, that whole general sense can be misinterpreted into a mile too, right? It's like, okay, now I'm going to start doing posts. Like one thing people think is every guest post should go on a different site because I want to get on the maximum number of different domains. And that's good classic SEO thinking, which I actually think is pretty dated today. And I'll explain why in a moment, but put that aside for a moment. And if that's your belief, then you inherently, no matter how good you are, you're going to work your way down to lower and lower authority domains, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are only so many really high authority domains that are going to say yes. And then you'll have used them up. And eventually you're going to find yourself down in the mire, right? Where there's no editorial control. You can jam 5 anchor text-rich links in the middle of your post if you want to, and stuff like that, which which isn't what I would advise people to do, but it's
and you wouldn't advise them to do it because it looks spammy, or you wouldn't advise them to do it because it is spammy.
Well,
you see the distinction?
Yeah, sure. I would say all of the above. I mean, so right. I mean, and also it's another way to judge whether a link is a good link or not is if you show it to one of your potential customers, would you be proud of it? Right? Or sometimes I give it a bit more of an acid test. Would you show it to your children?
Okay.
Right? And what will they think if they see it? Right? There's more tests you could give. I actually, my favorite test for whether a link is spammy or not is a simple one, which is if you have to ask the question, you already know.
Right. Well, I mean, but there's kind of a distinction there. And again, this is where we get into the philosophical kind of debate between white hat and black hat, and it's largely a subjective determination at some point. I mean, if I'm like, okay, I'm not asking for a link. I'm saying I've got the best resource on Red Apples. I'm going to email these people and say, hey, you should link to me because I am the best resource on Red Apples. Whether you do or not, I don't care. I'm not giving you any money. I'm not soliciting for a link. You just should do it, whatever. Word it whatever way you think on your end you'd be white hat. It's not my problem, or it's not my control what editorial control they have and how it's going to end up looking on their site, right? Why is the one asking for a link getting blamed or going to get a penalty possibly if these people over here don't have very good editorial control?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a great question and a complicated question, but you knew that. So
why I asked it.
Yes, there you go. So I guess that's the other part, and I kind of already alluded to this already, right? So if the site has no editorial control, then the question is, do you really want to be on that site? All right. So we know that Google discounts whole links from whole sites, like Inc., for example, got overrun by people who had publishing rights that were a little bit too free, and they started marketing links.
Yeah.
And all of us on this call, this video call, get the emails from people offering us links in Huffington Post and Forbes, and I'll write a guest post for you, and $200 for a link, and
that's
so forth.
cheap.
Well, whatever.
Where are you getting that quote from? Because my quotes are way higher.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll forward you a few. So, but Google's aware of those things.
Oh, of course.
Right. So, the sites that get mentioned in like many of those emails, I just assume that they're completely discounted at this point, like Inc. And therefore kind of a waste of time. And by the way, I don't think there's anything wrong with being on a site like Huffington Post or Forbes.
It could be good traffic. It could be good exposure.
Right. And I could tell you because last I knew, I still had open publishing rights at Forbes. What that means is I can go put an article up and there's no editorial review. No one looked at it. I load it in, I hit publish, and it's live.
Yep.
And so when you have lots of people with those kinds of rights, you're going to get abuse, right? So and the other aspect of this, and I want to make sure we get this into the conversation since I'm sharing the white hat perspective.
Sure.
I wouldn't like to just go do a large scale guest posting campaign and not do anything else.
Right.
Like for me, we're big proponents of very active social campaigns and building social followings and the like. And I would, every guest post you ever do, you should share, and not just once. It should be in your publishing cycle, which has a very interesting implication to it, which is you should be proud of it, right? And then it should be a part of a broader marketing campaign, not some standalone thing flapping in the breeze over here.
Yeah.
But it's just part of how you're marketing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you're getting on sites where you have audiences that might be interested in your products. I'm not delusional. I don't think you're going to get thousands of visitors clicking through on the links, but you might get a few.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the more important thing is you're getting branding value in front of your target audience, and you're backing that up by promoting the post and cross-linking between that post and maybe things on your site and from your site back to that post. And it's
right.
part
Ideally,
of
you get the most bang for your buck from any one piece of content. You'd brag about it and share it and write about it any conceivable way, and send it all out there.
Yeah, and that's what we work with people try to do. I just brought up the guest post topic because I know it's one of those areas where it's controversial and people have strong opinions.
Well, yeah, of course it is. I mean, there's two main reasons why I see that that's the case. One, because it was the main SEO strategy for quite a lot of otherwise reputable companies who wish to maintain its white hatness. Just like a lot of white hat companies wish to maintain the efficacy of the disavow process, which I've gone on public record saying many times that I don't think it works. In fact, I think it's more harmful than anything. Right. And I took my licks for it. But the other reason that guest blog posting is so controversial, as you mentioned, is because Matt Cutts, again, we bring up Matt, he doesn't even work there anymore. He hasn't worked there for years, right? But he said a few years ago before he left that guest posting was dead. Stick a fork in it, it's dead. So,
yes, and did you see the original version of the post? Because it got edited within about 3 days. Because the original version was more strident. And then based on feedback, which I assume probably included internal company PR, he eased it back just a little bit. But if you read what Matt wrote in the post, right, the example he gave was of, let's see, we did say that we were going to get to name calling, right?
Sure. Yeah. And as I said before in our conversation, once we get to name calling, we've achieved Twitterness. We're as good as Twitter at this point when we start hurling epitaphs at each other.
Yeah. I mean, it was sort of a dirtbag level pitch. I mean, it was like, there was obviously no care to the quality of the content being created. There was very little care put into the quality of the pitch. After all, they sent it to Matt Cutts, the head of the web spam team at Google. That's not, the way to get high scores on your IQ test. It was a really bad example. And so the first thing, the first barrier you have to cross with guest posting from my philosophy point of view is have a real subject matter expert, create a really good to great piece of content, right? Add value, right? I mean, a lot of stuff. My favorite example ever of rich anchor text is this post, and they're writing about, traveling in Australia in the post. And they have two sentences next to each other in the post. And it's like, this is the area of Australia you should go to if you're looking for wine to buy, period. Used cars are also or something like that. And they took buy used cars across the two sentences. So it's buy period space used cars is the anchor text. They couldn't even fit the damn anchor text in the same sentence. So, you know, it's my favorite example because I've clearly seen worse than that, but it's just so stupid, right? I mean, you know, the person was crunching it out so fast that, you know, they couldn't even work it into the same sentence because they had 40 others to write that day or whatever it was. But, you know, add real value and then put it in a place where people are going to appreciate it, where your audience is, where there's strong editorial control, and do it in moderation and integrate it in the rest of your marketing is, you know, so, right. And it isn't just about that. There's all the other things you're doing. So content you're publishing on site that you're designing to attract links. Data research studies are awesome. Infographics that have really actual useful information, as opposed to a lot of infographics which don't. One of my favorite ever was the one about how to wash your hands. And it's like, okay, that's a really important topic. I'm not sure it deserves an infographic. But, you know, so these are the kinds of things that we push people to do.
Yeah. I just want to quickly take a little break here. I see that E-Rock has joined us. Eric Christopher, otherwise known as E-Rock, he was the winner of our White Hat versus Black Hat SEO conference we did this summer. And he, unfortunately, was presenting for the Black Hat side. So right now, the Black Hats hold the prize. He won the $5,000 purse at our conference this summer. And because he's that kind of guy, he donated it all to his friend's child who's actually struggling with cancer right now. And I know he did it because I was on the call when we did it publicly.
Yep.
So
awesome.
This is how he won. He said, if you guys vote for me, I'm going to donate my prize money all to my friend. And he put up a picture of this child struggling with cancer.
Right.
We probably shouldn't laugh because it's a child with cancer, but I couldn't help but laugh because it's so Black Hat to do it this way. He said, if you vote for us, if you vote for me, I'll donate all my money to this child with cancer. And he did. So thanks for joining us, E-Rock. I don't know why you're not showing us your face and talking, but if you just want to show up so I talk about you, that's a good way to get marketing.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I didn't realize I had another program open and it's captured my camera, so it's not letting me broadcast on here. So,
well, we can hear you.
But anyway, I didn't realize. I thought it was so the time zone change. We're here in Arizona, and there's a time zone shift for everyone else, and we don't change. And so when you said 12 the other day, I thought you were referencing my local time. So I just went and checked the email. I'm like, oh man. So
right. The weird places in North America.
I probably missed
the province. In Canada, it's only Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan's the only province that they don't change times. And you're saying in Arizona you don't change times either?
We decided to just buck federal law in Arizona back, I think it was World War II, when they decided to do the time zone shifts. And we're just like, we'll stay. So everybody shifts around us, and we have to remember the different time zones. And
just to make it difficult for us. Okay, well, thank you for joining us. So we've been talking with Eric Enge, who is a top-level White Hat. Thanks very much, Eric. That was an interesting philosophical debate. I just want to kind of put a period on that before I move on. It's my show, so I get to have the last word. I hear what you're saying entirely. My biggest problem, I think, with that whole issue is there's a difference between the determinations that Google says objectively make it White Hat or Black Hat or against their rules or not against their rules. And then there's a whole lot of subjective determination as to practical recommendations that we SEOs make to clients. Now, we would definitely say, subjectively speaking, this looks spammy to me, and it is a risk maybe to put your link there. But I would like objective standards from Google as to, is this against your rules or is it not? And when they say, does it look spammy to you? That's not an objective determination. That's a subjective determination. And that's where the bees get in my bonnet. I start to get a little miffed. But we're not going to resolve this debate ever not on this show, and not period, ever, period. So I can go on from there. So thanks, guys, for joining. There's another thing I wanted to talk to you about, Eric, that I found was really interesting, and I mentioned at the top of the show. You presented with Gary Ilyish at PubCon a number of times. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about? Because for those of you who don't know who are watching, Gary Ilyish is, as I mentioned, a webmaster trends analyst working out of the Zurich office. He works out of that same office that John Mueller does. And he's one of the bigger Google spokespeople who goes to these conferences. I don't know if that's going to change now with Danny Sullivan taking a role with Google. But if you can talk to us, Eric, about how that came about, how did you approach Gary to present at PubCon, and what is your approach for interviewing Google at PubCon?
Sure, no, happy to talk about that. So, yeah, with Gary, I mean, I've seen him at a number of different conferences, and just at one point along the way, I had a lot of good chats with him and got a lot of value out of those chats in terms of just learning more about how this or that thing worked. Obviously, he's not sharing the algorithm with me, but you might learn, an interesting perspective or factoid, which is valuable. So
let me ask you, Eric, sorry, how much of the algorithm do you honestly think Gary knows? Like, do you think he knows 70% of it, 100% of it?
So, well, I mean, nobody, go to the obvious, nobody replaces Matt Cutts. Matt was, the 20-something employee at Google. So, and been there all along and sat in the so-called cool kids office at Google in Building 43 in Mountain View. And with Amit Singhal and Ben Gomes, and
they shared an office for a while, as I understand it.
Yes, they did. The three of them sat literally in the same office, and so his insight and depth of visibility to everything is there's few in the world that can get that. And I mean, Gary has been involved in certain things. He was a direct driver of the HTTPS algorithm, small and minor as it is. But I know he's been involved in some other things. Oh, there's something else he mentioned, and I can't remember it right now. It might have been href lang, but don't hold me to that. But I mean, so he knows bits of it, and of course, there's a lot of internal chatter about things, and but there's no way you get someone at a Matt Cutts level again. That's just not going to happen. Okay,
but I interrupted you. Sorry. Please go on about.
Yeah. Well, in any case, I mean, at one point, I just asked him if he'd be open to it, and he said yes. And then I got in touch with the folks at PubCon to see if they would add a session, and they did. And for me, see, and as we just talked a moment ago, or you were talking a moment ago, you have your frustrations with Google, and I understand where those are coming from.
Who, me? No.
Yeah, well, there you go. I was just trying to soft pedal it here a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the name calling later. And and it thought, like, when I have a chance to talk to Gary, and especially in a stage situation like that, I want to try to delve into things where I can get him to talk about things he wants to talk about. And if I do that, then I can get some things out in revealed for people who are paying careful attention. Sometimes the comments are pretty subtle. But they're important, and you got to be careful not to read way too much into it. But because a subtle comment isn't always meant to be interpreted in a broad, sweeping way. But I mean, when we have those conversations, I'm genuine with him, and he's genuine with me. And if he can't say something, he says so. And so I mean, I have a lot of respect for him. He has a really tough job.
Yeah, it's a really tough job. I don't begrudge John Mueller. I don't begrudge Gary Ilyish. They're in a tough job. I mean, people come onto their Hangouts and ask John Mueller point blank, "What is the algorithm? Tell me how it works." And I keep saying he can't answer that question. One, he'll get fired. Two, he probably doesn't know the whole thing. Three, he can't answer that question. Stop asking him how it works. But no one listens to me. No one gets the memo, right?
There you go. Well, a lot of people do listen to you, but not the ones that are going on that hangout and asking. Yeah. So that's kind of how I try to conduct those conversations, and it was interesting. Like the last thing at PubCon, we're about to publish a transcripted video for the session, We haven't published it yet because cleaning up live interviews, voice from live interviews takes a lot of work. But we talked a little bit about how different types of media makes their way in the search results. And, like YouTube and images and stuff like that. And he talked a little bit in a way that was pretty revealing about, well, yeah, I mean, clearly it's coming from different algorithms. Now, I think those of us who know search would have had the intuition that that's the case for quite some time, but I don't think I've ever heard a Googler say it. And for me, if I can get something on the record like that, that'll help a lot of people. So that's kind of what I try to do with that.
Let me ask you a tough question, Eric. When you're interviewing Gary on the stage at PubCon, are you interviewing him from the perspective of being in the Google camp, or are you interviewing him from the perspective of being in the SEO camp?
So
if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, sure. Well, I'm a lead, I think a leading digital marketing agency where SEO is a big part of what we do. So really my objective is to get some information out there. I don't vet the questions with Gary in advance.
Oh, really?
No. I bring the questions that I think are areas that he's going to be open to talking about, where I can get some things on the record. So I think that puts me in the SEO camp. But, I'll be honest. I mean, I'm very positively disposed towards Google. I've had a very good career there. I mean,
there's only so much you could really critique. I mean, at the end of the day, all SEOs, even the vocal ones against Google, we live or die by Google's good graces, right?
Right. And I mean, I like Gary. I like John Mueller. I mean, Nathan Johns, all those guys. They're good-hearted people. Enjoy talking with them. Happy to drink a beer with them. I mean, yeah. That's what I'm trying to do with those interviews.
Well, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the industry for doing that. I asked that question, and I'm going to turn it over to Clint and E-Rock in a second so these guys can get a word in edgewise, because Eric and I could probably go on for a few more hours like this. But whenever watching Danny Sullivan interview Gary or Matt at, say, SMX, before he now works for Google, I always thought to myself, that's a really softball question. Like how much is this Danny trying to get to the truth and give SEOs some knowledge that might help them in their job? And how much is this just a PR exercise from Google? And so, I always, call me the cynic, but I always wondered a little bit how much that was going on. But I trust you when you say that. I find it very interesting that you didn't vet the questions with Gary. So that in my book, that goes a far way in my book anyway. So I'm going to turn it over to Clint and E-Rock. You guys, my supposed maybe black hats, maybe they're kind of clandestine black hats today, because today we're all white hat SEOs, just in case Google's watching this. I don't know. Eric has a big, huge following. Who knows who's watching? So I don't know, but I wanted to turn it over to you guys because we've been talking a lot. If you guys have any questions, any comments you want to talk about?
I do actually. You wrote this one, The Art of SEO.
Yeah, and right now my laptop is sitting on top of 5 copies of it to jack it up high enough so it doesn't look like I'm looking down at people like that. So kind of level it off. So yes.
How did you get that many people? Well, there's 3 of you to agree on SEO, and then 2, are you planning on updating this at any time?
So actually, the story there is in December of 1998. Stephan Spencer approached me at SES Chicago. There's a lot of SES Chicago in my history, and asked me whether I would wanted to join him and Rand and Jesse Stricchiola in writing the book. They had a contract with O'Reilly, and they were a bit stranded, stalled, I should say. And I joined. I said yes after checking with the people that were going to be impacted, because it was going to take a lot of time. And I wrote the complete first draft, leveraging lots of articles that Stephan and Rand had written. But I wrote the complete first draft of 13 chapters in 13 weeks.
Wow.
So it was a hairy time.
I can imagine.
I can imagine. It took. I found that very funny what you said, Clint. How did you get 3 people to agree on what SEO is? That was the first part of the question.
Yeah, well, that was the first part. And, well, I mean, let's be fair about it. It's the idea of this SEO is something as static is wrong too, right?
That's the other problem.
Yeah,
you have a book that's going to remain the same for years.
Right. But this is what's so good about SEO testing, right? If you get your site to perfect optimization, whatever that is, and then 6 months later, the ball's going to move. So if you're not actually testing new things, you're off the reservation. So you have to keep tweaking and keep working. Right.
Yeah, that's another reason why I think SEOs maybe in more your area will tend to more subjective-y kind of statements, because those are the kinds that are formulaic that might fit multiple scenarios moving forward in the future.
Sure.
So you come by it honestly. I don't begrudge you that.
Right. Well, no, I mean, the idea that SEO is a simple best practices game and you can get your handle on what the best practices are is wrong.
Yeah.
Right. It's not. I mean, well, yes, it is, but then it isn't. You get sort of 3/4 of the way there with that philosophy, and the remaining 25% is, this iterative digging.
Just to give an example of that. So, for example, Clint and I are members of a group that do independent controlled variable SEO testing. And so we've tested down to the laser edge of exactly what keyword density will give you a boost, and then at what point it will actually start giving you a drop in rankings. We've tested this multiple times. So we know the exact number right now. I'm telling people what it is on my show, but I will also tell them, I have told them, and I will tell them again so they remember I said it. I'll email it to you. You can join the group, actually. It'd be interesting if you join. But that will change just what you said. That will change the second Google tweaks their algorithms. The second Google decides to tweak that keyword density algorithm up or down, some sites are going to get a little bit better and some pages are going to get a little bit worse. And so you're right. Like if you're going to go to that laser kind of, not really black hat, but technical kind of what are the actual ranking algorithms edge, you've got to change every time they change. Otherwise, your rankings are going to go up or down.
Right. Absolutely.
But if you take a more philosophical approach, for lack of a better adjective, that you've been suggesting, like, does it look spammy to you? Is it good content? Those kind of subjective questions, at least that, and this is a point in your favor, that will more, if you can achieve that Zen state and understand how to practically implement those subjective kind of, those kind of subjective terms, you will better stand the test of time, assuming that Google always wants quality content that doesn't look spammy.
Right.
Which is a good assumption.
Yes.
All right. Well, this has been a fascinating, I love these philosophical SEO debates. That's been fascinating, but I want to make sure we have time to answer any questions people have given us here in the chat. If you're listening and you didn't hear me say this at the top, if you're watching this live on YouTube, there's a bar at the top there to answer questions at the top right-hand side. Please mark them with 3 asterisks, as my co-host so dutifully asked you to do. So I'll start asking them now if they're receiving.
Oh wait, I do want to mention one thing, Josh. Can you hear me?
Go for it, Eric.
Yep. So yeah, a couple things. So one, if you're watching this live, make sure to subscribe so that you can get the best up-to-date SEO information from these gentlemen. And then I do have a question for our beloved guest speaker today. So I'm going to put you on the
sarcastic. He's just very affluent like this.
Thank you. In all seriousness, though, I am going to put you on the spot because I love to interview people. So what, in your opinion, based on the things that you've been testing, Eric, the things that you've been seeing across the industry, what have you noticed as being the biggest shift or thing that's working over the course of 2017? And then as a corollary, what's your prediction on the trend for 2018 as far as what you believe you think that the evolution of the algorithm or Google's next steps are going to be for 2018?
Great questions. I'll try to remember them both. I'll start with the first one. And that is, if you look at every time chatter starts out there about some Google tweaks to the algorithm, and then you see people talking about, well, what's behind it? Like every single release in a year, oh, content quality is one of the big things that and it's like this mantra that people are banging the drum on. Like it's like the only thing that Google looks at is sort of the implication of all this chatter that you see out there. And surely there's more to it than that. But having said that, I think as they get better and better at machine learning, even though it is a subjective criteria, to Josh's point, you got to chase it, in my opinion, and really work very, very hard on improving the depth and quality of your content. And I am fond of telling people when I'm presenting that, I'll point out the audience. I'll say, everybody in this room is underinvested in content. And then I'll put my hand up and say, including me, right? Because there's just so much to be gained with that. And I think that's sort of it's so much in Google's strategic interest. As their algorithms get better and better and better, they're just going to push the envelope in a big way. So that's one part to the answer to your question from my perspective, Eric. And
do you think that'll continue into 2018? I find it interesting you mentioned machine learning, because whenever Gary is asked how much machine learning they're doing, we're not doing anything. Don't talk about it. There's no machine learning. Only RankBrain, and that only deals with queries that we've never heard before. We don't do machine learning otherwise. Like, they'll downplay it very quickly.
Yeah, they do, and it is in some sense a little bit of a bogey, because what are they going to use machine learning to do? Oh, the same thing they were trying to do already. So it's not like you go from being over here and then suddenly SEO has become this thing so far over here it's not even on. No, I mean you still have sort of the same basic challenges that you have to solve. So the machine learning thing, yeah, they'll find some ways to get better at integrating user engagement into more parts of the algorithm. But it's not like it's going to be a whole student body left thing where you're in another, I don't know, universe or something.
Because then they wouldn't be able to fix it if it broke.
Well, among other things, right? That's one thing people don't understand about machine learning. I've actually built machine learning algorithms. I actually, it's on the other side of my door. I have taken the Stanford University machine learning course taught by Andrew Bing, and the University of Toronto course taught by Jeffrey Hinton, who actually consults with Google on their machine learning.
Okay.
And based on that, I actually built my own machine learning algorithm, which is, from a commercial point of view, useless, but it was an exercise.
Right.
What it does is it takes all the data that we collected on Twitter engagement, and you can put facts about your tweet in it, and it will predict your chances of getting a retweet.
Oh.
Okay. And it's a machine learning algorithm that used a neural network. It took 48 billion calculations to generate the algorithm, and it works. And but the problem is, neural network, you have all these nodes in the network, and people aren't going to understand this unless they know. But imagine there's 5 nodes on this layer, and there's 12 on this one, and 6 on this one. And these are the things that go into the algorithm. And then all these equations are guiding what's happening between all these nodes. It's all opaque. I mean, you don't know what's going on.
Right.
Right. So they're very hard to debug. And people think that Google is going to replace every algorithm, every human algorithm they have with machine learning. Why would they do that if the human-generated one is working perfectly well?
Yes.
Because they have intuition about how to debug that one when something new comes out, the human-generated one. Not so with the machine one.
Right. I guess it all depends on, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. You said the same thing at PubCon, but John Gianandre, who was their head of AI, who is now their head of search quality, I believe.
Yep.
Only because he was their head of AI, so they're going to move in an AI direction, I guess.
Yeah. No, there definitely was a shift with Amit Singhal leaving, and You know, we don't know for sure, but the desire to make the shift might be why he left.
Mm.
Don't know one way or the other, but
yes, there was some other allegations going on at the time I won't mention.
Well, there you go. Yeah, it definitely was a big move in that direction, and people also misunderstand RankBrain, right? They think it's the algorithm. Well, no, if you listen to the descriptions of it, it's a very specific machine learning algorithm that serves one point cause that works remarkably well on long tail queries and does basically nothing on head terms.
Right. And it presents a suggestion. We could have this screen or this screen. This is the way it was working. This is what I think, based on what people click, could do. Which one's better? The quality raters say this one or this one, and so that's what gets selected?
Yeah, I mean, it's something along those lines. And I could actually, I don't have time to pull up the screenshots because we're almost at the end of the time. But
that'll be for the next time you join. People be, we want to see RankBrain. What he knows RankBrain? What? They'll be freaking out.
Yeah. So the query, we captured query for a whole bunch of things on many dates, but because we do that periodically. But one of the queries we captured in July of 2015, I think it was why are PDFs so weak? And what it does is the first result at that time was a PDF file discussing why the coalition the Iraqi resistance to the coalition invasion was so weak.
Right.
Had absolutely nothing to do with the user's query. And then we captured the same thing 6 months later, and it now at that point, the first result was something about the security and encryption of PDF files.
Closer.
So now it's on point, right?
Yeah.
And if you do the same search today, the entire first page is about PDF security.
Yeah, yeah. So that's RankBrain. That's how it works. But okay,
that's RankBrain in action.
Yes, that's fascinating. Again, we could talk for hours about that too. We could talk about hours for everything. I want to make sure I get to some of these questions from the people who've been watching here. So Neil Cheeseman asks, and this is open for anybody to answer it. And Eric, I'd love to hear your point of view too, if you have one on the questions. Is what is the best way to find out? What is the best way to find keyword opportunities for your own website that are not ranking on page 1? So what is the best way to find keyword opportunities for your own website, several 100,000 pages or posts that are not ranking on page 1? I don't even know if I understand the question.
Search Console, use Search Console, that'll tell you, and use SEMrush. Those two tools right there alone will do what he's looking for.
So I think he wants to know new low-hanging fruit.
So essentially, like when we get a new client, we know the market's going to be tough, but we want to keep them on longer. So we go after the low-hanging fruit, find what's on page 2, bottom of page 1, in Search Console and SEMrush based on their reporting, and we'll go after those first.
Right.
While we're working on trying to figure out how to rank for their dream keyword is what we call it.
the head terms. Yeah, I think that's probably what he means. I think you're right there, Clint. Xander asks an interesting question. He says, do you think Google changed adult classifiers in September? Many queries are now showing mainstream brands instead of the usual adult results, even for blatantly adult queries.
So much to your group's surprise, I actually have some insight to this particular question.
Oh,
I think they did actually. There did appear to be a shift at that point in time, and we saw in some of the tracking we do a bunch of adult sites take a hit, even those that were call it soft, soft porn type sites appeared to take a hit. Right.
There's so many jokes. There's so many jokes. I'm through my head right now.
I'm biting my tongue so hard, it's bleeding.
Yes,
my tongue's bleeding.
Yes. That's no. We could use the rest of the show for just joking about this. I'm not even. Okay, so I find it interesting, just politically, what's going on right now with Google and Facebook, catching a lot of heat for not curating the results, maybe to a lot of people's satisfaction when it comes to fake news or when it comes to egregiously what seems to be racist or prejudiced results. So I find it interesting that they would make this change to the adult classifier right now. You can comment on that if you like.
Yeah, no, and they also made changes recently oh no, that's not. I'm sorry, that's a paid search thing. I was confusing topics, but yeah, it is interesting, and they are getting a lot of pressure on that. The Wall Street Journal actually just released an article yesterday about featured snippets, and they called out examples of some featured snippet queries that weren't giving good results. One of which was biggest cheaters in sports, and the results started with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Now, I'm from New England, by the way, so I'm a passionate Patriots fan.
Oh, so they're in the right spot.
Yeah, so, and I have been from long before they were any good, by the way, so it's no fair weather.
There you go.
So, but nobody earned as much as wealth sports-wise as we got out of that run. Which is still going, obviously, but yeah, Google fixed it within a couple of hours of the article going live.
What is your stance on having Google and Facebook, obviously, essentially what I call censoring? So they're, everyone's calling for them to filter the fake news, but who's deciding what that fake news is, especially when we all know that Google outsources significantly to India, for example?
It's very complicated identifying what's fake news, right? I mean, there are things that are legitimately subjective, and subjective that doesn't always mean a negative. Sometimes it's like, yes, it's subjective. There's
of course, there should be debate around some issues.
Another person will see it that way, and is it one thing offering a Republican point of view and another offering a Democratic point of view? I don't know how they could truly get a complete handle on that. There's always going to be edge cases they're going to miss. Yeah. I just don't see how they get around that.
I personally think it's very dangerous, and I happen to have a TED talk about this. I personally think it's very dangerous to have a private for-profit American Silicon Valley company deciding what is true and what is not. That is the height of danger. Whether you agree with, whether you fully agree and you're in that culture as well, they should not be the arbiters of truth. But at the same time, I appreciate what you're saying, Eric, in that, well, they already are doing it. And so let's not bitch and whine, Josh, about whether they should be doing it or not. Let's get it fixed. I think the only way they could fix it would be implementing a Wikipedia-style editorial process where do you agree or disagree, and just make that as unhackable as possible. Well, but
wisdom of the crowd is sort of a misnomer, right? I mean, true. So I don't know how you solve the problem. It's a great question, Clint, because I literally don't know how you solve it.
Well, I think they're already tracking entities, including people, and so they know I'm an entity on SEO. So if it's an SEO related question, and I go on there and I say this is false, it's kind of like the local guides. They know I'm in Victoria, BC. They know I'm a local guide for Victoria, BC. And when I say no, this restaurant's not open past 12 p.m., my answer holds a little bit more weight than say 10,000 people from the Philippines or from micro workers or something.
Yeah, well, no, that's certainly true, for sure. But that's still very complicated and true. And your point is well taken. That a publicly held for-profit company in Silicon Valley, being the arbiter of truth, but on the other hand, they're the one with the service providing the answers, so they're stuck with the role. And then I guess the question is,
boy, I wish I was stuck in that role.
Yes.
Boy, they're
to be the philosopher king.
I mean, boy, I have so much empathy
position.
For those guys.
Yes, if only I could be the philosopher king.
Well, by the way, I'm in no way in this point, trying to be necessarily empathetic about it. I mean, the fair question is, what's the right oversight? Right? And
governmental.
Well, is it governmental? I don't know, but maybe it is. It's not a question I've tried to think through, but the idea that there should be some sort of oversight for that particular topic area. But then, okay, how do you trust the oversight? We can't even trust our government not to do gerrymandering
Right.
on voting boundaries.
Right. And why should it be the U.S. government when Google supplies the majority of the world with their search answers?
Right.
So give it to Justin Trudeau. Trudeau will take care of it.
Yeah, right. Jeez.
Okay, well, it's 1 o'clock, guys. I'm going to answer one more question from the group here.
Yep.
Here's a technical kind of SEO question. We haven't dealt with that a lot. He asks, his name is George, and he says, please advise if you recommend adding pages for AMP. Do you recommend moving to AMP right now?
So what I will tell you, we did just publish on October 9th a study where we looked at and interviewed 10 different brands and their AMP experiences. 8 out of the 10 got positive experiences. Only 3 of the 8 were media sites. We saw one ticket listing reseller site that got 100% lift in conversion by going to AMP. But it's not simple. And if you're going to take on the challenge of doing AMP, then you have to commit to building essentially the same UI you have for your mobile responsive site. And if you're not willing to do that, I would stay away from it, because having a crappy looking site that's a lot faster is going to perform really badly for you.
Yeah.
But
right.
But the opposite side of the thought experience is if I have the exact same user interface, or virtually the exact same user interface, and it loads in 1/3 the time, that's not going to be anything but good for you.
Right.
Right.
Can you, Eric, when you referenced a positive experience, and I don't want to, like, you don't have to address this in the midst of interrupting, but can you address how you defined the parameters for positive experiences?
So it was usually, the answers varied, Eric, but it was an increase in conversion rate, increased e-commerce sales. There were a couple of e-commerce sites in the mix that we looked at.
Those are 2 good things.
Yes, they are. And then there's even data that suggests that users look for the AMP symbol in the search results and are more likely to click on it. So I mean, unfortunately, I'm going to have to run here very shortly. But on the flip side of the coin, I get the other side of this, which is, okay, this is going to be sitting in the Google cache.
Yes.
If you let it, which you don't have to let it, by the way.
Right, right.
And that brings some challenges from an analytics point of view, and then also concerns about, Google eating the web kind of thing.
Back to that philosophical concerns we've been having.
Sure. So, but it's easy to fix. Just leave one small trivial bug in your AMP code. It won't validate, it won't go in the cache, but you'll be leveraging the open source protocol to create really fast pages.
Wow.
And I know from handcrafted pages we did, we went from 461 kbytes on one sample page with a handcrafted AMP page with basically the same UI, 145K. Gonna be faster.
Okay. Well, that was a mind blower. That one, I love that one. That's a beautiful hack. Thank you very much. Okay, so thanks, guys. We should definitely close down the show. I know, Eric, you got to run. So this has been the White Hat versus Black Hat SEO show. As my co-hosts here and guests are so nice to mention, if you could like it, we'd appreciate that. If you would subscribe, that'd be nice. I always forget to say these things. I always just remember to say at the end of the show, if you have any more SEO questions, by all means, you can contact myself. Contact the show at joshbachynski@gmail.com. And Eric Enge, I'd like to thank you very much. Well, both of you, I'd like to thank you for joining very much. And I hope to have on a future show if you'd like to join us again. And bring Mark, bring other people if you like, and we'll get a good, merry philosophical debate going on here. Yeah, well, and hopefully we'll get Eric and Clint back, and we'll get more into that back and forth part of the debate. So sure, yeah. Well, we'll let them talk a little bit, so give our mouths a break. So, okay, well, thanks very much, guys, for watching. This has been the White Hat versus Black Hat SEO show. And as I always like to say, we're normally on Wednesdays. This Wednesday coming up, we have Matt LeClaire who has taken over for the late, great Eric Ward, who unfortunately passed away recently. He's taken over his mailing list, and we're going to be talking with Matt about what's that like, taking over for Eric Ward, and talking about the great Eric Ward a little bit on that's next show. That's the coming Wednesday. That's on the 22nd. And the 29th after that, we have some Black Hat, our old Black Hat friends from NFG SEO coming to join, so that should be fantastic as well. So again, thanks a lot for joining, guys, and if you have anything final to say, your contact information or anything you want to say, now's the time.
Nope. See you next week.
Yeah, I'm good. You can follow me at Stone Temple is the handle, but other than that, good to go.
Perfect. All right, thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you soon.
All right, thank you.